Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we will be reviewing the Elto Elora honey processed Ethiopia from Goût & Co. There's the bag right there. And Goût & Co, based out of Chengdu, China. And they're a coffee roaster that's appeared on this channel on numerous occasions, including our recent review of the Misiones Estate, Sudan Rume, a wash-processed Colombian coffee. And in that review, I'd mentioned that we'd had plenty of opportunities to review Goût & Co in the past, so we could branch out and try some of their more interesting offerings. And given that we've reviewed plenty of their wash, plenty of their naturals, and a couple of their more processed coffees, it felt like a good opportunity to review something that's in the middle of all of those, which is of course this honey processed coffee, as we don't get an opportunity to review too many honey processed coffees out there because I've kind of noticed that they're not as common as maybe they once were. Regardless, I'm looking forward to discussing one of their honey processed coffees, as this right here is day 60. And recipe we went with for this coffee was Goût & Co's recipe, which is a 16.5 to 1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 94 degrees Celsius, about 201 degrees Fahrenheit. And I like this one best through the V60, which does indicate a more medium fine grind. Roast profile for this coffee. This one definitely was on the lighter side of things, even in comparison to some of the other coffees that we have reviewed from Goût & Co in the past. And their coffees in general do tend to be on the very light side of the spectrum, as they are one of the lighter roasting Asian-based coffee roasters that we do review on this channel to this day. So for that reason, this one's in line with that, and we can say that this coffee does skew on the very light side of things by most standards and metrics. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 36, first impression through the V60, and the coffee was immediately off to one of the more impressive starts that we've ever had from one of Goût & Co's coffees up to this point, as it felt almost Panamanian geisha-like in the flavor presentation, offering a very nice level of cleanliness matched by a solid but well-defined softer tropical fruit intensity. Listed stone fruits quite prominent, leading itself towards a very solid first impression, easily one of the best first impressions we've had from any Goût & Co coffee. Day 39 through the Chemex, and the coffee was equally as good this time, as it's combining the intensity of a natural with the cleanliness of a washed, making for an ideal experience for a honey processed coffee. Lovely combination of the listed stone fruit characteristics as they present in a cleaner and well-defined sense. And in theory, isn't that the way honey processed coffees are supposed to be? Aren't they supposed to have more intensity than a washed and more cleanliness than a natural to make for a perfect combination of the two? That hasn't always been the case. Even honey processed Central American coffees or South American coffees, for me at least recently, have all skewed a little closer towards naturals and been overbearing. This coffee, though, is the perfect combination of the two based off these first couple of impressions, given just how much cleanliness there is, as you could probably deceive me into thinking that this is a very intense wash processed coffee from how much intensity there is to it. But regardless, very nice first couple of impressions to this one. Day 42 through the UFO Brewer, and the coffee was the least impressive it had been to this point, as it's offering less fruit intensity and a more generic feel. There are some dried fruit characteristics presented within the finish as the cup does cool down, but it is lacking much outside of that, so this was my least favorite day and experience of this coffee throughout the entirety actually. Day 45 through the V60 with Goût & Co's recipe, so that's 16.5 to 1 at 94 Celsius. And in our previous review, I believe I mentioned that I think their recipe is somewhere between 92 and 96 degrees Celsius and 16 to 1 and 17 to 1, so we split the difference for both of those. And the coffee is very nice again. It does continue to offer similarities to Panamanian geishas, as it's very clean, a little bit of that citric grain sense to it, which I often describe as being reminiscent of sugary cereals, and I can definitely see that to this one as well. Plenty of listed florality in a clean and pronounced sense, with plenty of a pronounced nectarine-like characteristic to it. So having that stone fruit is obviously going to be a very nice selling point to me on these sorts of coffees, so a lovely day once again. Day 48 through the Chemex with the same adjustments, and there's been great consistency to this coffee, as it does offer plenty of the florality, but skews a little bit more on the citric side of things today, with a little bit more of the listed grapefruit characteristics. Otherwise clean, floral, and fruit forward yet again. All major components that I'm looking for within any experience for my coffee. Day 51 through the V60 with our standard recipe, and we'll likely go back to Goût & Co's recipe, as it feels like it had been better on previous days, as it still does remain mostly fruit and floral forward with slightly less definition. Still very clean, plenty of white floral qualities to it, a lighter colored peachiness, as it's all presented in a very clean sense, so nothing but positive things to say. It just did have maybe a little bit more citrus than the previous experiences that we had. Day 54 through the V60 with Goût & Co.'s recipe. And the coffee is a little bit better than the previous days, as there's more of a focus on the almost Panamanian geisha-like qualities with a prominent white florality and a citric grain component that, again, reminiscent of a lot of sugary cereal qualities. Peachiness and a sweeter grapefruit in the finish, as the coffee does remain very fruit and floral forward as expected based off of the experiences, based off the description. Honestly, this coffee always sounded like it was going to skew in that direction. All right, so let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. Perhaps a little surprisingly, no level 5s, but plenty of level 4s. Let's go through them. Cleanliness, level 4. We said right from the onset that this coffee was very, very clean, especially for it being a honey processed coffee. The only reason I would have been able to tell that this was not a true wash processed coffee was exclusively because of how intense it was. But I can say in the past, we've had plenty of wash processed coffees that have been as intense as this one was. So that's why I'm really happy with the way that the cleanliness for this coffee did turn out. I could easily be deceived into thinking that this is a wash processed coffee. That's just how clean it was. And it was on the higher side of level 4 because there is tremendous definition to all of the fruit and floral qualities to this coffee. So on the verge of level 5, but we reserve those for just super ultra clean coffees overall. Finish, level 4. Really enjoyed the finish of this coffee. There were some of the later days where the finish was maybe a little bit more citric forward, maybe a little bit more acidic than I would have necessarily enjoyed. But outside of that, when it did have a little bit more of that lingering floral quality, it did have a slight Panamanian geisha-like feel, especially given just how I was presenting in terms of the cleanliness. Sweetness, level 4. Never in doubt, it's actually on the higher side of level 4. Both that and the acidity are on the higher side because this one offered a very sweet and intense experience throughout the entirety. We continue to go back to that as I was just really stunned by how much intensity and sweetness there was to this coffee, given how it continuously remained clean throughout. So level 4, where we opted to put that, primarily coming in the fruit sense, plenty of these stone fruit qualities to it, even a sweeter citric characteristic. As what do they have listed on here? Grapefruit, a little bit more of a bitter citric quality to it, but the other qualities they have listed are stone fruit characteristics, which we got plenty of in this one. Acidity, level 4, that's probably a little closer to what we were getting for the grapefruit, as there was a little bit of a citric brightness to this one. Maybe that's one of the things that hindered the overall cleanliness of this coffee. It's that the acidity wasn't quite as well defined, and since it was a little bit sharper and a little bit more intense to this coffee, then that could have taken away from the cleanliness. As if that could have been toned down a little bit, then we're probably pushing that cleanliness up to a level 5. I'm going to look at their tasting wheel itself. They do have acidity level 4, so they agree with me. It's a pretty acidic coffee in general. I'm gonna scan their tasting wheel because I don't think I looked at it too much. Sweetness is pretty high, intensity pretty high. Fermentiness, I strongly disagree with. It's not a particularly fermenty coffee. I think those are the major takeaways. Florality, they do have a little bit lower, but yeah, level 4, they have it between a 3 and a 4, so that's fine. Let's go ahead and move on through the rest of this tasting wheel. Citrus fruit, level 4. There's plenty of these citric qualities to this one, not necessarily exclusively the grapefruit that they have listed on here, but there's a little bit of that lemon characteristic that's very common in Ethiopian coffees in general. Stone fruit, level 4, the most abundant of the fruit qualities within this one for me. They do have both the apricot and the nectarine characteristics, and I can definitely see that much more of a fresh fruit sense to this one. Very clean, very well defined, so level 4 is where we opted to put that. I realized we just skipped the florality. First note they have listed on here is magnolia, so that's probably what they're going with. I saw plenty of the white floral qualities to it, and given that it does have that slight Panamanian geisha feel, I can see a little bit more of those jasmine characteristics to it, which is very helpful to my overall impression of this coffee, so very happy with that. And then it looks like we might just have one last thing worth discussing. We'll discuss the berry fruit real quick. Berry fruit level 3, I got a little bit of those melon-like characteristics, but the final thing actually worth discussing, body level 2. And not a lot of body to this coffee, though. I don't think that was ever expected. Even with it being a honey processed Ethiopian coffee, you're still expecting it to be lighter bodied in general. So outside of that, as I'm looking at this tasting wheel, very clean looking tasting wheel, and I do think it is a very good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. And it's much closer to what Goût & Co has listed for this coffee than the Michiones Sudan Rume was for us. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. This one's probably my favorite Goût & Co coffee. If not, it's one of my favorites. I do have to go back and maybe look because it is kind of surprising how many other coffees we've actually reviewed up to this point. But this one was very well executed. I found so many positives to it, and it's not really surprising given that it hit on all four of the big things that I'm looking for in a coffee. Very clean, very sweet, very floral, very fruit forward, especially in that stone fruit-like sense. So it really won't come as too much of a surprise to anybody that I enjoyed it. But what made me really happy about this coffee is that this is the way I want my honey processed coffees to be. Great intensity while still offering great cleanliness. And anytime you get a natural that is as clean as this, or anytime you get a wash that's as intense as this, I'm very happy with the way that either of those two coffees turned out. So having this one be exactly what I'm looking for is ideal in every sense. And I'm very happy with the way that, we are kind of ending these two reviews from Goût & Co. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to. Same type of coffee drinker as myself, lighter profiled, skewing on the more clean fruit, floral, and sweeter side of things with a little bit more intensity. And if you don't mind your coffees just having that stronger, intense level to it, then this one will have some very nice, rewarding characteristics, especially in that fruit sense. So I think I've kind of gone over those plenty throughout the entirety of this review, so that's kind of the best way I can leave it. If you guys are enjoying this content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Elto Elora honey processed Ethiopia from Goût & Co. Thank you for watching.